I'm Nate Jackson.
And I'm Eben Britton.
And this is the Caveman Poet Society.
So the endocannabinoid system is our primary regulatory system. It regulates a lot of different functions within our bodies. We produce our own endogenous endocannabinoids, and when we have a deficiency in our own natural producing endogenous endocannabinoids, our body usually communicates to us through an inflammation. Then we replace those deficiencies with phytocannabinoids from the plant. So that's the way that cannabis works with our system to help us get into homeostasis.
Get it out! Get it out!
Ow! Ah! Here we are.
We're here.
Another episode
Another
of the Caveman Poet Society. I'm Eben Britton, as always joined by my brother, Nathan Jackson!
What up, dude?
Hey, my brother.
Not much, man.
I'm
happy to have another pod. We just recorded one yesterday. We're doing it again today.
Yeah, man. Doing what we love. Just grinding them out.
That's right.
Reps on the mic.
That's right.
We've got Jed Bauer on the ones and twos.
Jed Bauer!
Ow!
I missed the book club, that's all.
Yeah.
We'll get back to it. We've had some good guests as of late.
Yeah, especially today.
Hey, a returning guest.
First ever.
First
return
ever.
guest.
Honored.
And this is because we've had so much good positive feedback from it, and also because there's so much involved in the science of cannabis that we don't understand. And I imagine that people are learning every single day because, finally there are minds being put together to kind of come up with why it works, how it works, for whom it works best. We want to welcome our buddy back, Len May. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, great, man.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Hell
Appreciate
yeah,
it.
Len.
Len is the CEO and founder of Canna Health.
Endo
Canna Health.
Right.
And more important than that, he's the sciencey guy.
The sciencey guy.
And today we actually have a very specific reason we wanted to bring him on. We wanted to test Eben's genetics and figure out what works for him and why. And this is based on your gene profile, but I'll let the sciencey guy take it away. Tell me, what are you going to look for with Eben and how are we going to do this?
Yeah, so we have specific genes that have a direct relationship to our endocannabinoid system, and then we have other genes that have an indirect relationship to our endocannabinoid system. And some of them...
I want to... Sorry to jump on you.
Yeah.
But let's just define our terms as we go here.
Okay.
What is the endocannabinoid system?
So the endocannabinoid system is our primary regulatory system. It regulates a lot of different functions within our bodies. We produce our own endogenous endocannabinoids, which are called 2-AG, anandamide, etc. And when we have a deficiency in our own natural producing endogenous endocannabinoids, our body usually communicates to us through an inflammation. Then we replace those deficiencies with phytocannabinoids from the plant. So that's the way that cannabis works with our system to help us get into homeostasis, which is balance out our regulatory system.
So your system doesn't necessarily need the cannabis to reach homeostasis, but in some cases it does, or it aids it? I mean, does your own endocannabinoid system produce the stuff that you need to regulate it?
Yeah, our own endocannabinoid system produces our own endogenous endocannabinoids to regulate it. When there is a deficiency in our own natural producing endocannabinoids, then phytocannabinoids in the plant really help out because they mimic the way their own natural endogenous endocannabinoids work.
Right.
So deficiencies happen just by being in the toxic environment that we are, stress, not eating the right foods, not getting enough rest, are all these contributing factors to a endogenous cannabinoid deficiency?
Yeah, all those factors, and in addition, your genetics play a role.
Okay.
There. So you can have a genetic predisposition to something, and what will happen is it can be triggered. So your genes don't change. They stay the same. But the expression of those genes can change based on environmental factors, stress, nutrition, all kinds of different things.
And so when you introduce cannabis into your body, that stimulates the endocannabinoid system to produce more of its own? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, that's the idea. The idea is that we have receptors that are built in our bodies to accept those phytocannabinoids from the plant.
Right.
So we have CB1 receptors and CB2 receptors. THC binds to the CB1 receptors. CBD actually stimulates other enzymes that help to stimulate the CB2 receptors that are located in our immune and digestive system. So what happens is, the theory, if you consume enough phytocannabinoids and you get your body stimulated enough to produce its own endogenous endocannabinoids, you no longer need phytocannabinoids in the plant because you've reached homeostasis.
Right.
And what happens a lot to people in their later stages in life, I've talked to, hey, I used to consume cannabis and now I started consuming high doses of THC and I'm not feeling that good. It's not making me feel really well. Well, maybe you have an overabundance of phytocannabinoids that you're putting in because your body no longer needs that. So you're taking too much.
Yeah.
And that could be a case for a lot of people.
I think
Interesting.
I think a lot of people do that because I heard once someone said the more you do, the less you need. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
the recommendations are always been from doctors and scientists that I talk to is, microdosing. And people do that with CBD too. They take too much, 1,000 milligrams. Well, all the studies I read, you don't need that much. And people are saying 25 milligrams across the board. It's an individual personalized experience. And all the studies and everything that I read, 5 milligrams can just do as much as 25 for certain people, for certain conditions.
Right. And so cannabis is personal. I just heard that right outside in the green room. Cannabis is personal. Everyone reacts and responds a little bit differently to different strains, different dosages, different
Terpene profiles.
Yep.
yeah, and based on their own genetics. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to dive into Eben's profile. So get into it.
So just before we get to that, I did 23andMe about, I don't know, a couple months ago. I got my 23andMe done. Len, through your program, you can take that raw data, plug it into your machine, and it spits out this. It spits out this information that's based specifically on cannabinoids and how my body reacts. So I had a chance to look at it. It's pretty amazing, too, by the way. Nate, if you get the 23andMe, which I advise you don't, because I hear they're selling your data to insurance companies and probably the government, so that one day there will be a cloned version of Eb walking through the door that nobody wants to deal with. And but if you do, it took about 10 minutes.
Right.
I plugged my raw data in. I got an email back super quick that was like, your cannabinoid profile's ready to go. So it's really interesting, man.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to hear you take me through this thing.
Yeah, I mean, 23andMe or Ancestry or any of the genetic tests, we can translate their genes that they test. But we also have our own genetic test that tests all the different genes that we test. So we're dependent on the genes that they test and the version of the what's called an array that they use. So basically, if you had an earlier version, if you did your 23andMe 2 years ago, you may have more coverage than you will with the new one, because the new one, they just got $350 million from GlaxoSmithKline. So as you know, your data is not only being sold to insurance companies, it's also going to pharma. So now GSK invested all that money, so they want all the data for themselves. So you can swab your mouth, send it in, and get a full coverage report, or you can do what you did, is upload your raw data of 23andMe or Ancestry.
And what percentage of that, of the full report, do you get if you just give the 23andMe info?
We hit every single one of the symptoms anyway, but it's just depending on the version that they use. So for Eben's, if you see some of them, I would say maybe 70% coverage, and 30% is something that you would get with the other genes that we look at ourselves when you do the full swab.
Cool. Before you get into it, this begs the question. The fact that you can use this stuff from Ancestry to determine some of the responses to cannabis, does that mean that certain races of people respond better to certain cannabis than others, and it's kind of go along ancestral lines?
Sure.
Interesting. I mean, we don't look at it in that aspect in terms of races. We look at genetic profiles. So we look at things like anxiety, depression, cognitive function, metabolism, pain, sleep, but we haven't correlated yet to specific races. So the idea is to gather data, right? And one of the things you talked about, selling data. So our data is anonymized. What that means is we have two separate servers. So your DNA resides on one server. My name, Len May, my personal information resides on a different server. So we don't have sample reports. Every report is created dynamically on the fly. So we pull information from one that's encrypted, we pull information from the other, and we build you a personalized report. So if anybody hacks it, they'll get DNA, but they won't know it's Eben's DNA, for instance. So that's the way we kind of put it together.
Yeah.
So we'll aggregate the data. The more data we have, we'll be able to aggregate it and put it together and say, okay, for this profile, all these people that have this type of genetic polymorphism, they react better to this type of cannabinoid profile, and we'll get better to hone in on specific genetic profiles.
Nice. Well, let's talk about the big guy's profile then.
All right, you ready?
We already know he is a Neanderthal. We were told that through 23andMe. So did Neanderthals smoke weed? Let's find out.
That is true. All right, so let's see a couple of these that really stand out. And I mean, you're okay with me sharing all your personal information to all these nice people?
Social security number.
Let's talk about it.
Well, so the first trait or condition that we looked at is anxiety. So there is one specific gene that I wanted to discuss with Eben and see if this is something that is that makes a lot of sense. So there's a gene. We call it FAAH, F-A-A-H. This gene. So the way we look at it is you have your gene, you have your specific marker, and you have your genotype. Your genotype is either homozygous or heterozygous. I know it's sciencey terms and all that, but I'll break it down what it means.
Me don't understand those words.
So you get identical chromosomes from a parent, so you can have identical homozygous. So it'll be CC. So you get one each, or you can get a different one from different parents. So you'll have a CA. So in yours, you have an AC, which is called heterozygous. So what that means on that specific gene, if you have this marker and this polymorphism, this is what it means. Based on your genetics, you may have reduced anxiety in a threatening situation relative to the most common genotype. So I want to ask you if that is true, and I'll tell you why I think that it may make a lot of sense. Does that make sense? Where you have reduced...
It means when shit goes down, he's calm.
Exactly.
And that you played football in the NFL. I mean,
that's the question I want to ask you. And you called signals. You were a team captain at one point.
Yeah.
So you would have a lot of shit coming at you at the same time. You probably would have to remain pretty calm in a threatening situation.
Yeah. Always been very cool under serious pressure or intense situations.
Cool under fire.
Almost to a fault, I've thought in my life. You know, looking back at certain situations, I'm kind of like, should I have been more upset or more panicked in that situation than I was? But
you're like, please, sir, stop beating up that elderly man. Please, don't do that, sir. I beg of you.
It makes sense.
I found it pretty interesting, but I want to ask you to see if that confirm that. And it says, however, you may have an increased reward-related impulsivity. So overdosing on certain things like food, drinking, substances. Please consume responsibly.
Yes.
Yes?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have a tendency to go, and just eat all the food?
Yeah, increased impulsivity.
Yes.
Drink
Yeah,
I'd say that's definitely
all the beer.
Interesting.
Definitely a trait of mine.
Okay, so if that's the case, we suggest titrating down on THC, and I'll tell you why as well, and how it all fits together. So getting something of more balanced type of formulation, and looking at terpenes that are like more linalool, limonene, which will give you a little bit of a boost in your serotonin and dopamine production, so you can be a little more focused at that time and make some more clear decisions.
So a strain that is, can you give an example of something that would work for a condition?
Yeah,
you just
so
described?
strain, for instance. So one of the things is I learned that strain from Dr. Ethan Russo. He told me that strain refers to a virus. So we got to stop calling it a strain.
That's a very good
point.
He
calls it a chemovar.
Oh, right. Well, that's going to be a hard one to sell, though.
Chemovar.
Yeah. So
or cultivar.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I've heard him talk about
What about flavor?
Yeah, sure. Your flavor, your ratio. We talk about your ratio.
So it's a little more scientific.
Yeah, your specific ratio should be more balanced. So something like a 1-to-1, 1 part CBD, 1 part THC, and you can consume that in a tincture or a sublingual. And
Well, what about the guys like me who likes flower, who like to smoke?
Like
Sure.
me.
Yeah.
I like to smoke.
Yeah,
I
and
like
so
to,
like,
I
like
enjoy that.
The
So
stuff
I'll-
you get around here is how do you know?
So I'll tell you, flower. So I'm not it's hard to dose specific flower when you're giving somebody a suggestion, but I'm a flower guy too. So I know for myself, I do much better with a very, very nicely expressed kimura or strain. So what I mean by that is we had a strain recently that was 16% THC. But man, it was such a beautifully expressed strain. It smelled great. It had, nice crystals on it, and it made me feel great, perfect. And you don't need the high THC.
Right.
You need a fully, nicely expressed strain that has some CBD, has some THC, but not the 30% THC stuff with a lot of myrcene that's indica dominant, heavy.
Yeah.
That's the stuff. So it's very similar to my profile too.
Yeah, I feel like when I do those super high THC stuff strains and I smoke too much of it, I just feel saturated in it, and I feel just like kind of slow. And then the next day, super groggy,
Right.
waking up. I need very, very little. But like you said, everyone's trying to do the next highest THC. Like, oh, ours is 31. Well, this one tested at 32. Well, where's the one that's like you said, 16, 17, something that's more manageable?
Yeah, and not only the THC content, but also the terpene profile of that. Like you'll see it when you look at different strains, they have a smell to them. Like the ones that have a limonene dominant, they smell a little citrusy. They have a fruity smell of them, and those are the ones that align better with my genetics, and I think you'll do well with those kind of strains.
Yeah.
So you guys, I remember you saying this as well. You were kind of an ADHD type of kid.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and so were you at all? Were you like a antsy kid?
Not antsy, but attention deficient.
Yeah.
Yeah, like got in trouble in class, fucked around
Yeah.
a lot, always climbing trees, and
Yeah.
so I was
Always
the same way
getting
too.
other students to, talk to me, getting other kids in trouble all the time.
But I think that cannabis is a good ADHD medication, and for some people who are naturally ADHD prone, it brings them down a little bit. It makes them like, okay,
Yeah, so it's a great point. So I'm ADD, not H. I wasn't the hyper kid.
hyperactive.
I was basically, so I would sit in class, and one of the things I do when I do a talk, I show everybody my desktop. I have, like 100 different tabs open because that's the way my mind works, and that's the way my mind always worked. So I have all these different thoughts. So I would kind of daydream. And when somebody I try to pay attention in class, but I can't because all these thoughts are coming to my head. So they tell you, like, when you meditate, let a thought kind of pass.
Yeah.
But when you're a kid, I never knew how to do that. So cannabis allowed me to sort of slow down my mind, notice those other things, but try to focus more. But what happens to me with high CBD strains, for instance, a lot of people say CBD calms me down and helps me sleep. Well, it's like drinking caffeine for me. If I consume something with CBD late at night, I'm on. I can hyper-focus. I can work for hours. But that's my personal experience with that type of ratio. So that's what I get from it.
Well, so let's get back into Eben. What else
right.
you got on him?
All right, let's see. So we did anxiety. Let's see if we can find something else to go over.
So Eb, a little bit about, if you feel comfortable talking about anxiety, do you feel anxiety on a daily basis?
Not daily, but throughout my life, I've had bouts with anxiety attacks. And, I think that comes with my family history, that combined with depression that comes and goes, but it's like riding waves in an ocean. They come, they go, they, rear their ugly head. August was a really brutal month for me, anxiety-wise. I just felt like my nervous system was sizzling the entire month. I was just on edge and really not in a good headspace, constantly just finding myself having to get grounded. Whether it was meditate or go get a workout in, or, I had to take a step back from cannabis through August because for whatever reason, every time I would consume it, it would send me off into the abyss.
Yeah.
It was almost like there was too much for my brain to process. In that time, I know that was kind of a crazy astrological time. We could talk about that on another podcast, but
was Mercury retrograding?
I think so. And Mars was coming in, and there was all kinds of battles going on, I think, with the planets. But anxiety is something I deal with, even though, and the interesting thing is the anxiety comes when things are fine, when things are, when there aren't any actual...
It's your genetic profile. He already said
Right.
it. That you feel calm when things are crazy.
Right.
But when things are calm, you feel crazy.
Exactly. Exactly right.
Right on. And you know what? This is a perfect segue because I'm looking at cognitive function. So I find this really fascinating. There's a few different things, but this one specifically I wanted to talk to you about. So there's a gene called COMT, COMT. That gene is, they call it the warrior gene kind of thing. So it gives you anxiety and it gives you depression depending where you are in the spectrum. But this specific...
You said the warrior gene.
Worry, yeah.
Yeah.
You worry
Yeah.
or you're a warrior.
Don't be a worrier, be a warrior.
The worrying warrior. That's what we
I think it's my Philly accent that's coming out. That's
No,
probably
for
what
sure.
it is.
Yeah.
But I found this to be really fascinating. So you have a genotype that's GG. It's homozygous on that as well. But this says, Eben, you may be at an increased risk of significant brain changes following cannabis. This can result in both emotion and memory alteration. Please consume responsibly. So when you're consuming high doses of THC, that may be an issue where it's creating some cognitive challenges in you. And when those receptors are bound, you can be going through some of those emotional issues based on your genetic profile. So if you kind of maybe pause or go through a CBD with terpenes or some of that instead of the THC, I think it'll help your receptors reset themselves.
That's exactly what I did. Because during that time, when, like you were saying, it was really sending me into emotional turmoil, for lack of a better term, I got this awesome CBD tincture at the Cannabis Science Conference in Portland.
Right.
And, man, it was almost like it was a reboot.
Exactly.
It rebooted my whole system and brought me back down. So it's really fascinating you say that.
That's really cool. I'm really happy because this isn't perfect, so it's giving you a guide, but so far it's pretty much, your profile. Right?
Now, the other thing with these is these genes they're like light switches almost, right? And they can, because they're present, doesn't necessarily mean they're activated.
100% right on.
And they can be deactivated throughout your life. They can probably switch on and off. Is that right?
It's exactly it. Just because you have a propensity towards, it doesn't mean it's going to express itself. There's a lot of things. So I was talking to somebody this morning, and I was saying that you have this propensity, and they're saying, well, every once in a blue moon. I said, well, if you have this propensity towards anxiety and you're driving in rush hour traffic in LA, you're getting anxious, and you're consuming a sativa dominant hybrid that has a lot of limonene. It's boosting serotonin into your bloodstream. You already have a bunch of serotonin and dopamine. Right. So you're going to be paranoid. And that's exactly the same thing. So no, you don't have it all day long, but you have an event that triggered your genetic expression. So absolutely agree with you.
Interesting.
Very interesting. And with that, we're going to take a little break. We'll be right back with Len May. Cool.
This whole rigmarole of the NFL and the 16-week regurgitation of we got to win the turnover battle, and if we get this our run average up from 3.2 to 3.3, that'll make a difference. Mark Kistler wrote an article about the Broncos. If they just kick one extra field goal a game, they'll be Super Bowl champs. Mark Kistler, you're a dumb fuck. There's so much more that has to go into that. You have to work your ass off to be Super Bowl champs. You don't have to just kick one more field goal.
Hear more from NFL quarterback Jake Plummer on the Caveman Poet Society. Available wherever podcasts can be found.
Hey, we're back with Len May from Endo Canna Health. And we're talking about Eben's Canna Health. let's open up that can of health and toss it back over to Len.
I love that, man. You can of health.
Yes. We love it.
So you, in our quick break, you were talking about edibles and how that, and some interesting findings on Eben's profile had you thinking about edibles.
Yeah, I just had a question because I didn't. So a lot of people have. So one of the things I ask people is like, have you ever had a bad experience with an edible? And I would say, 80% of the people raise their hand and say yes. So a lot of people have a bad experience with an edible because of the high THC and the conversion that your liver does to THC. So it converts it to a different substance that's a little bit stronger, a different way that your body processes it. But other people have this enzyme deficiency in this gene called CYP2C9. And they have that, then they have an enzyme that is they're not able to metabolize THC through the digestive system. So people reported like cold sweats, psychosis, pain.
So when you can't metabolize it, what does that exactly mean?
You can't digest it. You can't metabolize. You can't absorb it into your body. It will not
so
properly.
it just stays there and keeps affecting you?
It stays there until you pee it out or whatever it is. So it's not your liver doesn't your enzymes don't break it up exactly right. They'll still break it up, but it'll cause you a lot of problems as it's going through that process, and that's what people are reporting. So I wanted to ask you before I share the results, do you have real negative experiences with edibles?
Let me ask you.
You tell me.
Based on my genetics, what would you say the answer to that is?
The answer is no.
Really?
You have an enzyme that's not deficient in you absorbing. So that's why I wanted to ask you to see if you actually have real painful negative experience with edibles, or do edibles just really mess you up?
I have had really negative, crazy, psychedelic, trippy experiences on edibles. But then I've also had really great experiences with edibles. So
I was hanging out with you a couple times when you were eating some,
Remember in Vegas, I had about 200 milligrams in edibles.
That's right. And
I
you were
was
fine.
I was fine.
Yeah. If I ate 200 milligrams, you wouldn't see me for 4 days. I'm not fucking kidding. I can't handle it like that.
So the reason why I brought that up is you would always have a negative experience. So if you have this enzyme deficiency, you will never have a good experience with an edible. So what happens is your other genes may be triggered through anxiety, whatever, and then psychosis. And that's why I want to talk about the last gene that I want to talk about, because that makes a lot more sense, which is your effect with edibles when you take a lot of THC.
Yeah.
And I think that's a relationship, not the enzyme issue, because you don't have that gene.
Interesting. Okay.
So
my body breaks it down normally, or
your body.
Fine.
Yeah, your body doesn't have an enzyme that causes you to not be able to digest or metabolize THC.
And what percentage of people fall on either side of that?
It depends where you look at it. There's the CYP2C9 is pretty significant. It's 10 to 20% of the population that have that genotype. So if you have this variant, it's pretty significant. I've had a lot of people who contact me and said, every single time they take an edible, it makes I hallucinate. I get really sick on it, and they all have the CYP2C9 variant.
Well, I want to present this scenario to you, and I want you to tell me, in your best science-y guy interpretation, how this monkey was feeling, because they tried to kill a monkey with too much THC. You might know about this study. 9,000 milligrams they gave him. He ate 9,000 milligrams. He didn't die. What happened to the monkey?
The monkey was pretty fucked up.
What happens when you eat that much? Like, what does it do to your body?
I don't know personally what it does to. I never had anywhere close to that much, but I would imagine what would happen is those receptors are bound with enough THC, and when you take more, it's not going to do anything.
Right.
So it's just going to hang out in your body. You're going to absorb it, and you're going to get rid of it as waste.
It's like pouring more marbles into a glass that's already full.
It's full, and that's it. You've bound those receptors, and you can keep going more and more and more, but I don't think it's going to do anything else.
Yeah.
That sounds like hell.
That doesn't sound like a good experience.
It does not sound
Poor
fun.
monkey.
Right? Poor monkey.
So I wanted to ask you this. going along the lines, and this is the last gene that I'll cover on this unless you want to do more, but that FA gene that I talked about earlier, it also has it also is related to opioid side effects. So this is why I found a really interesting polymorphism in your genes. On the AC marker, it says you may have a higher risk of experiencing side effects from opioids related to people with the most common genotype. So people that have a common genotype will experience some side effects, but you may experience greater side effects than common people. So if you've received opiates, consider informing your physician of this potential predisposition. It actually adds to depression. It can cause nausea, vomiting, and other things. So I want to ask you if that's accurate first, and I'll tell you why I think this is an overall really, really important thing to test for.
Yeah, it's very accurate. I've never had a great experience with opiates.
Me neither.
I always felt the full brunt of the side effects that came along with those things. Felt the symptoms of addiction within, very short-term periods of use. And it's the reason I think that I gravitated towards Adderall throughout my NFL career, because I knew that every time I took these, Vicodin or Percocet, whatever it was, I was going to feel terrible. And Adderall gave me some of that pain relief and helped, obviously, with my energy level and my focus. And so that really became my form of medication in the NFL. Where many guys end up in this state of taking, 10, 20. You've heard the stories of guys taking like 100 Vicodin a day. It's crazy. I could have never done it. I would have been so sick and felt horrible that I couldn't have even gotten there. So that totally makes sense.
Great. So I feel this is a really, really important marker for everybody.
Yeah.
So when you're prescribing an opioid to somebody, you should know that they have this genetic variant that may make them more susceptible to side effects of opioids and opioid addiction. This should be a standard.
Is there accepted scientific evidence that gene causes that aversion to opioids? Does the medical community admit that much?
Yeah. So every single one of these that I state, it's associated with an actual assay, a clinical trial, or a study that we reference. So the studies are all already here, and you can click on it and you can read it. So the studies are all peer-reviewed. So we only post something that has a peer-reviewed study associated with it. So the medical community, whether they read it or not, the study is there. It's been reviewed by peers, and they can go and reference that study. So yes, it's widely accepted that this genetic variant is associated with this specific, side effect or condition.
Yeah, I'd say that's a super important.
Well, it's super important
to know.
The endocannabinoid system also sounds pretty important for what you're saying, and doctors don't know shit about that. They weren't taught that in medical school, right? And so for them to learn, they got to listen to guys like you.
Yeah, maybe guys like me, but you're absolutely right. They just need to be learning based. So I was talking to a group of surgeons maybe a few months ago, and they wanted to learn about the business of cannabis. And these are reconstructive surgeons that do reconstruction on people that have cancer, that have parts of their faces and stuff removed. Really, really intelligent, great physicians. And I was going through this presentation about what's going on in the business, and I had a couple of slides about the endocannabinoid system. And I said, let me skip through these. And I said, can you go back to that one? I spent 45 minutes talking about the endocannabinoid system with these guys.
Right.
So absolutely, they didn't know. But they said they were never taught that in medical school because they went to medical school, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So now they're starting to teach that in some medical schools.
They are, okay.
Yeah, some medical schools are starting to reference the endocannabinoid system. But if you're learning based, if you're a doctor and you're on top of your game, you should always be learning new things. So if
there are financial reasons why they might not be, and also the same reasons would be why they wouldn't read the study that just tells you that opioids are bad for some people, because it means they're not going to be prescribing as many of them, and the money's not going to be flowing into that hospital, right?
Yeah, well, that's that's a whole other thing. Yeah, with the I mean, you're obviously getting some financial compensation in order to push opioids from the pharmaceutical companies.
Absolutely.
However, saying that there is a pharmaceutical company that showed other pharmaceutical companies there's a way to use cannabis to make money. Yeah. And hopefully, if that's going to be the trend in the future, and I'm not advocating, isolating compounds and putting them together, but from a business standpoint and from a legal standpoint, if pharma now sees that you can make money with the plant itself and not synthetics, maybe they'll start coming up with, here's all the different components of the plant. Let's create compounding pharmacies that can create Eben his own personalized formula that he can get anywhere. And here it is in a tincture, this Eben's formula you can take anywhere.
You know what's crazy is that the same substance, the same plant that has big pharma coming in, also has Marlboro and fucking Philip Morris coming in.
And Corona.
I mean, it's such an interesting thing because one is supposed to always talk to, it's going to give you cancer and kill you, the cigarettes, but the pills are supposed to save your life. They're both coming in the same direction.
Yeah, they're coming for the money.
Exactly.
They all smell the money.
But they both have different intentions and view the plant differently and its application differently and how to sell it and how to fucking package it, market it, and who to give it to. I mean, so how are we going to have some kind of consensus here when it's like the medical community is trying to sell it and so is fucking cigarette companies?
It's funny you should say this. I was in Kentucky at a big hemp farm, and they had like this building, and it said Philip Morris on it. So they actually converted a tobacco farm to hemp right now. So they're growing hemp.
That's good.
Tobacco. Yeah, it's great.
Well, I think what we were told is that those cigarette companies are going to Canada first because it's being federally legalized there.
Yep.
And there's a lot of big money going there. A lot of money being invested there. You probably know better than we do, though.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of money that's going in there, and also Canada has. One of the main reasons why a lot of money is going there, they have export licenses. So we were at Cannabis Science Conference. One of the people there heads up the German cannabis program. He says they still don't have their shit together in terms of cultivating cannabis there. They get all their cannabis from Canada. Mm-hmm. So they have an import deal with Canada for that.
Interesting. So
is it wise to invest your money in Canada cannabis right now? Cannabis?
Cannabis is it wise? I don't know. I think a lot of the stocks. I'm not a stock guy, so I don't know. But a lot of the stocks seem to be overinflated.
Right.
So I don't even know if it would be wise to. I would pick a company that has a solid track record of cultivation, testing, retail, and if they have that, I think it's a pretty good idea to invest in that. And if they have an import agreement with somebody else, that means they're able to get their products out in different countries. Right. Israel does that too, by the way.
Yeah.
Export?
Yeah.
And Israel is kind of where all the good science is coming from, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, because it's federally legal there for medicinal purposes, and the reason why it's a really good way to be able to see what's going on is because they only have 90 strains, and they prescribe everything through a doctor. They make sure that they have a follow-up visit with a doctor, and they actually get their medicine from a pharmacy. So a pharmacist actually has to give you that medicine. So they track you based on condition. They track you that the product that you're getting is tested and it's accurate, and they have follow-up visits to make sure that it's working so they can modify the titration. Wow. So and they're documenting everything and conducting clinical trials as well.
So do we have access to their data?
I may have some access.
Nice.
No, not yet. I think they're trying to create clinical trials.
Yeah.
Not trying. They're working. I think there's 12 clinical trials that are going on right now for cancer, for autism, and other things. So and epilepsy. So they're going to publish those trials in Israel because it's easier to do that, and then hopefully the FDA can start approving some of us to do trials here in the States.
Yeah. Does it need to be descheduled or rescheduled here in the States to be able to do these trials?
Not to do trials, but the thing with trials, Sue Sisley was explaining to us at the Cannabis Science Conference. She's a doctor that has a license to conduct a clinical trial in the U.S. The problem that she has is she can only use the cannabis that's grown in Mississippi, and that cannabis is only about
swag.
Yeah, it's 5% THC.
Yeah.
You can't even find that stuff anywhere.
Right.
So you're limited to what they're able to cultivate, and that stuff comes with mold. It comes with all kinds of stuff. It's not tested. So you're putting that into somebody's body for a clinical trial that's already affected, may have some sort of illness, and how do you know you're not exacerbating that illness with the mold and the other crap that's in the cannabis they grow?
That's like trying to study alcoholism and making people drink O'Doul's.
Is that an intentional sabotage? By them? Or do they just not have any clue how to grow proper cannabis?
They have a clue. It's completely an intentional way, because they said, go here, get your cannabis there, and we're going to make sure we do everything in our power to show that this isn't a cure-all, substance. So yeah, I think it's intentional. That if it wasn't intentional, they would cultivate the highest quality medicinal grade like any other pharmaceutical product.
Right.
And they don't do that. And they have the capabilities because they can grow peppers.
Sure.
And
sure. I mean, they grow anything.
Right.
Remember in Half Baked, the movie?
I remember the movie, yeah.
When, Dave Chappelle works at that science lab.
Yeah.
And he wanders into that back room where they have all the best weed in the world.
Yeah.
And he starts taking it.
Yeah.
I mean, why isn't it like that? Why isn't the government fucking growing the best?
Well, they are, I think, probably.
Yeah. The weed that makes you fly?
Yeah, I mean, the best weed in the world. Why isn't, with all the resources that they have, why aren't they growing the best shit that you could possibly get your hands on?
I think they are, but they're looking at it as an extraction model instead of a cultivation model. So I believe there's government entities that are taking cannabis, extracting it, and creating all the components and putting that together. They're doing that in the Netherlands. They have cultivation facilities that are like that half-baked one, and in Israel and other places. And I believe that they're doing it here in the States too, but for our research purposes, they're making you use the swag that's grown in Mississippi.
It's a bummer, man.
It is.
Yeah.
But people here are growing it meticulously. They're spending all of their energy on perfecting the process. And so sometimes when we get to smoke that stuff, we get a skewed perspective on what everyone else thinks about cannabis and how it should be grown, because it's such a part of our cultural reality, or the way we identify with the plant and all that. These people out there who live in middle America who don't identify with it the same way probably don't expect the same kind of quality or excellence or smell or look or whatever. It's just an apple's an apple.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, we're super spoiled here. In traveling to other places and looking at, what their menus are, even in legal states, California is by far, in the States, by far has the greatest quality, because we've been doing it longer than everybody, and we've perfected it at some point. But what's happening now is I talked to a couple of companies. They do this thing they're calling it genetic editing. So it's not genetically modified, because that's a negative term. So they do genetic editing. So they're able to genetically edit the plant to get consistency of the plant no matter what you want. And they're doing a lot of that in Canada right now.
How do they do
Sounds
that?
sketchy.
Yeah.
They go into the DNA of the plant, and they modify the DNA of the plant. They can do it from a tissue culture, or they can do it from the seed stock, and they make sure that the plant grows a certain way every single time. Like they did with corn before we got GMO, and learn what it really does to our bodies.
Dude, I had a conversation with a farmer from Idaho. And this guy was a groomsman at my best friend from high school's wedding, and we went to back in August. And I just started talking to this guy about the dealings with Monsanto that he does. He grows corn, he grows sunflowers, he grows maybe soybeans, and he has some cattle. He raises about 100 cattle that are beef cattle. And talking to him about Monsanto, and he said he doesn't use their stuff anymore because his point of view was they're getting too greedy. And I was like, oh, dude, it's a different world out there. But talking to him about the genetics of these plants, how they modify these things to have certain resistances to bugs, to certain parasites, and then for the crops to work synergistically with Roundup. So Roundup doesn't destroy these plants, but it works to, protect them,
right?
Obviously. And it was just mind-blowing to listen to the depth of science that's involved in what these people are doing, modifying these plants, these, foods that, people have been growing for thousands of years. People have been growing corn and cultivating corn. And now it's this Frankenstein shit that doesn't die. It kills bugs when bugs eat too much of it. It just builds up in their system and they die.
So what does it happen to humans when we eat too much of it?
I don't know.
That's the point.
Yeah, and so like you want to make this perfect plant that like does all the things to help you grow it well, but then when you give it to someone to eat or to consume, how does it work in their body?
That's exactly it. We don't know,
Right.
And we don't know. So when we genetically modify corn, the person that did that first, he won a Nobel Prize for that. They thought, oh my God, you have a brand new invention. This is the greatest thing ever, because the goal of it was to be able to grow corn in environments that don't need a lot of water. So that he was going to go and feed people in Africa. And he was on the cover of magazines, and but we didn't know what that genetically modified food is going to do to our cells.
Right.
And what it did to us was, a lot of different things, increase in cancer, mutation of your cells internally. So we don't know what that genetically edited cannabis is going to do to our bodies either.
Wow.
But what they're trying to do is grow those, get seeds from those, like Monsanto, and
Patent them.
patent the seeds. So now you have to buy those seeds. You want that kind of formulation, you have to go and pay them a licensing fee from Monsanto. That's the goal.
Right. Now, what about, just to jump back real quick, you know what, before we hop into that, we're going to take a little break here. We'll see you guys in a second.
How many poses did it take to get it right? Before you found the one you liked? Before the caption captured the action? When you ass-bagged it and hashtagged it? Then hit send and cash grabbed it? Ass backwards gas tactics. How many of your angels died? Withered, worn out, hiding behind the crystals in your eye? Hoping not to be summoned again for another lie? Falling into the World Wide Web, squirming as their wings are caught, and looking up to watch the twinkle fade from the eye which they were made to serve, to honor with beauty, the beauty of truth. How long did it take to get it right? How many of your angels died?
And we're back with Len May. Len, so let's round out this genetics test. Let's finalize it. I want to hear what formulations would be best for me, etc. Turn it over to you, man.
Yeah. So one of the things that we also do is once we individually identify all your different genetic variants, we put everything together into a wellness plan. So this is a suggested wellness plan. So we took all the different symptoms and conditions, and we have basically a one document that goes through each one of them. Now, people have asked, sorry, I got all this. What do I take? I just want one single thing to take. And there's no such thing as a one single thing. It's situational. And it depends what it is that you want to achieve. And also, we empower you with information so you can make an informed decision what's right for your body and when. So I'll give you an example on how this works. So we have this suggested wellness plan. So the first thing we did is we took all the genetic markers that have to do with anxiety. So anxiety is first. So anxiety genetic markers. And we've reviewed all your markers and basically put together a suggestion that you should consume a more balanced formula that has higher CBD, lower THC.
Any popular quote-unquote strains out there right now that you think fall into that category?
Yeah, I mean, we don't suggest strains because it's all about tinctures and sublingual, so you can dose correctly. But, I mean, I can give you some examples of that. So AC/DC, Harlequin, Critical Mass, a lot of these strains. And going into a shop, more and more shops have CBD-dominant strains that are available to them. So you can just see what your ratio is, look at the test results, and consume things that have more linalool in
Okay.
them, beta-caryophyllene. So linalool is also found in lavender. It's a terpene that's a calming terpene, but it's not the one that's going to put you to sleep. So you're not going to be couch locked like myrcene does, but it's a very, very nice experience to have that as a dominant terpene. And beta-caryophyllene is always good because it reduces inflammation. And when you combine it with the other cannabinoids, it gives you a really good feeling, and it helps to reduce inflammation that's going out through your body with an endogenous cannabinoid deficiency that you may have.
What chemovars are high in linalool and beta-caryophyllene?
Did you ever think you'd be saying that sentence about 5 years ago?
No. Couldn't even have imagined it.
Yeah, I mean,
Linalools.
you're looking at a sativa dominant hybrids, a lot of them,
Okay.
but not the lean towards the middle, like something in the middle of sativa and indica. A lot of those have an expression. You can smell them.
Like an OG series? Or is that's
Well, here's
too
the
high in
thing.
THC?
Here's the thing. So the names, right? I don't really know because you go down to one shop, they call something OG, and another shop calls something OG, and then the same one is called Alaskan
Strawberry
Thunderfuck.
milkshake.
Right.
Whatever it is.
Wait,
So,
what was that one?
Alaskan Thunderfuck. You know
Yes.
that one?
I've tried that.
Have you?
It's good
Yeah.
stuff.
Oh, I thought you were making that up. That's awesome.
No,
I actually
that's
really
the one.
liked it.
Yeah. So I don't know about the name. I can just tell you what the ratio is, and when you go in there, in California, you're supposed to have test results, right? So you can look at the test results that are on the strain or chemovar that they sell, and you can see what it is. So take a look and see what it is. And we're a little bit ahead of everybody else, and people will catch up, and other states will catch up. But you need to look at what the profile is. But if you don't look at it, if they don't have test results, you can start educating yourself by using your own senses.
Mm-hmm.
So things that smell florally, like pinene, smells like pine. So if you have a chemovar or a strain or a formulation that has a really piney taste, smell, that is high in pinene. So you know what pinene, and then you can define what pinene is going to do for you.
Oh, so pinene does different things to different people.
Pinene does different things to different people, but pinene does a specific thing, but also your experience with pinene and cannabinoids may be different based on your genetic expression. So cannabis is personal, but as a terpene, pinene has a certain effect that it has. It helps you antifungal qualities and helps you to focus and things of that nature. So
I love pinene.
yeah, it's a great profile. So going back to that, the wellness plan. So that's anxiety. So then we go to sleep quality. I don't seem to have much sleep issues according to this profile. So you can consume.
I don't. However, like you said, if I consume too intense of a sativa at night, I could be up all night.
Yeah. So one of the things, well, first of all, sativa, limonene will probably
Sure.
pump some serotonin. But this is the one thing that I really found with a lot of people consume cannabis to help them sleep. And when you consume a lot of THC, it binds to your receptors and it really, really activates your brain. Even though you're tired because
right.
you consume myrcene, so you pass out, you're tired, but your brain is still active. So I've had a lot of people say, well, I fall asleep, but I can't stay asleep. And it wakes them up because their brain is still active. I kind of equate this to like somebody who drinks a lot of alcohol and they black out, but they sleep for 14 hours and they wake up super tired because they never hit the REM state of sleep. They're always in alpha state. So you're still tired because you never go into your deep state of sleep.
Right.
So that's too much THC right before bed.
Too much
Is
THC,
Not a good thing.
not a good thing because it'll stimulate your brain activity. Your brain will work, but you're not going to get into that resting sleep, that's healing sleep that
Makes
you need.
sense.
There's so many yin and yang aspects of this because the cannabis does put you to sleep. I mean, it reduces the amount of time it takes you to fall asleep, and then it helps you stay asleep, or at least it does for me. And then in the morning, I don't remember my dreams.
Right.
When I consume cannabis, when I don't, I'm all up in those dreams.
Super
man.
vivid.
Yeah, I'm waking
Yeah.
up in the morning like, what? Really?
Yeah. My dreams have been insane lately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think less is more. So just titrate low. If you're going to do high THC, just don't smoke a lot.
Yeah, just a
You
little
know,
bit.
Right.
a little bit will go a long way.
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
that. But here's the thing that I wanted to really mention when it comes to these plans that are more specific to what you should look for. So, if you have a propensity towards anxiety, for instance, okay, and then you're suffering from some neurologically induced pain, neuropathy. So you know that for neuropathy, you need THC because anything. So here's my rule of thumb, and this is something that I sort of created in my mind. I try to communicate this to people. Anything that has to do with your central nervous system requires THC because that is bound to your CB1 receptors, right? Anything that has to do with your immune system, your digestive system, you need CBD. That's CB2. So that's kind of my rule of thumb.
Interesting.
So I know that if the pain is caused by neuropathy, something neurological, I need some sort of THC. However, I know that I have a propensity towards anxiety. So I have to make a decision, and we give you that. You make an informed decision. What's right for me? Is my pain so bad that I'm going to risk having anxiety, or am I going to time my day differently to make sure that when I take my higher THC, I'm going to do that in a safe environment at home, not on the 405 in traffic where I can, not that I'm advocating you should medicate and drive anyway,
right.
But I'm saying in a stressful situation where it can exacerbate anxiety. So you have to make that decision. You become your own doctor in a way. And I'm not saying you shouldn't work with your healthcare professional, but you should be very well informed to make the right decisions, what is right for you.
Yeah.
And conversely, you just talked about CB1, CB2, THC versus CBD. Can THC have an effect on the digestive system? Can it have an effect on the CB2 receptors? Can too much THC be bad for digestion?
Yeah, I mean, THC doesn't bind to your CB2 receptors, but it works as an analgesic anyway. So my opinion is they all work synergistically. Just because you have binding to a receptor on one side and binding to a receptor on the other side, it doesn't mean that both of them together don't have an effect. So if THC works as an analgesic is a pain reliever. So if you're feeling digestive pain, you take your THC and it'll help to block the pain. If you combine that with your CBD and the right terpene profile, you'll address the inflammation that's causing the pain to begin with. So you'll feel better and your body wants to heal. You yourself want to heal. You're in a good mental state. You have hope. You have faith. You're putting good things in your body. You're going to help your body heal by getting the right ratio in there. So together, the synergistic effects of the whole plant are what you need. I was listening to a scientist. His name is David Miri. He's at Technion University in Israel. And he was talking about they're doing cancer research. And he has 140 different cannabinoids that they identify. He said a lot of these, we don't even know what they are. We just know they're a cannabinoid. We don't have a name for them. We don't know what they do. So when he removes a couple of them from this petri dish, it has a different effect on that cancer cell.
Right.
So they all work together some way, and we don't know how.
Right.
And that's why these isolated components, hey, I'm just going to take a CBD isolate. Well, you're missing all the other healing qualities or a distillate or something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
You just mentioned 140 different properties. We talk about THC, CBD. That's it.
Yeah.
And you're saying there's 140 or more other ones.
Oh, yeah. And then plus the terpenoids. There's 80 or so of them that we identified.
So what made the THC and the CBD the sexy ones? Because it gets you the psychotropic effect, and then, I mean, because they're more plentiful, because they're easier to understand.
Yeah, so THC, obviously, because it gets you high. So, and that's the first one we researched. And then, CBD is another one that we came up with because we found a receptor for that. But we may have lots of different receptors throughout our bodies. Could be CB3, could be CB4.
Right, I've heard of these CB3s.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Being discovered.
Yeah, we identified another receptor. You're absolutely right. So we don't know yet. Our government has suppressed testing on this for years and years and years and years. So we don't know. We haven't done enough research to find out what other components there are. Now we're looking at CBG. There's a study on CBDV for autism. They've already done an animal study on that. So they're looking to see how that affects autism and showing great results. So they're isolating those compounds, but it's very, very difficult to conduct studies on isolated compounds because you're not sure how the other compounds really help to work with that as well.
Is THC the only one out of 140 that's psychoactive?
That binds to that receptor, yes. However, CBG also creates a couch-locked feeling. I've heard people report back that they have a psychotropic effect with CBD. So people said this. I don't know the science that actually that actually is published around that. But as far as we know, that yes, it is. But I'm sure there's other ones that we're going to discover.
And CBG is, if I understand it correctly, is almost like the mother cannabinoid. Is that right?
That's what they're saying, yeah.
Every other cannabinoid is sort of an iteration of CBG.
Yeah, there's a relationship there. And then you have other cannabinoids that are conversions of THC, like CBN. It's that, if you leave your cannabis out in the sun, it might convert it. People are saying, "Hey, I found this weed in my car that I had there for a year. Man, did it get me? I couldn't get off the couch." Well, maybe that converted the THC to CBN, like a banana that lays there and becomes brown after a while because it's overly ripe.
Right.
So it converted to a different compound that gives you a different feeling.
Infinite combinations and variables.
It's
here.
fascinating, man.
And I think maybe the big takeaway for our listeners is to go to Endocanna Health and get swabbed, right?
Get swabbed.
Yes. Baby!
Get swabbed.
Love it.
Tell them how they can find you.
Yeah, endocannahealth.com, and my email is Len, Len, at endocannahealth.com. Find us on social at Endocanna Health, and that's probably it.
Love it, dude.
Awesome.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Now's about the time.
You know what it is.
And Len, you've been here now, so feel free to sing along.
Feel free to hop in, brother.
Is there a karaoke version?
No.
Hey, guys, before we jump into that, remember to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn. Refer a friend. We love that. We love to hear from you guys. Send us a note. Check out our website at www.cavemanpoetsociety.com, on Instagram at Caveman Poet Society, and Twitter at Caveman Poet Pod.
Turn your phone off.
Turn that phone off. Eat the right foods. Try meditating. Give yourself 2 minutes a day. Might do you some good. Eat the right foods. Get out in the sunshine. Get some exercise. Feel your blood flow. Get a sweat on. Go hug a friend. Hug a family member. Do some good in your community. We love you guys. Until next time, we are out.
Everybody did a really good job on the pod. I said everybody did a really good job on the pod. Said everybody did a really good job on the pod. I said everybody did a really good job on the pod. Hey, Eben did a really good job on the pod.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nate
Yeah?
did a really good job on the pod.
Thanks, man. And Len
Len
did a really good job on the pod.
did a really good
Thank you.
job.
And Jed, of
Jed.
course, did a really good job on the pod.
As always, Jed.
Said everybody did a really good job on the pod.